So let's start with what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the introduction here first. You can see here, it's Dave Portnoy versus Insider. Henry Blodgett, I believe, is the CEO. Nicholas Carlson is the global editor in chief, and then Julia Black and Melchior Lisea, those are reporters for Insider. Okay, we're going to go through the introduction, and then we're going to go through sort of what we need to be looking at as we are in order to analyze a complaint, I should say. So what we should be looking at, what makes a good complaint, what doesn't make a good complaint. And then we'll go through the actual charges and whatnot, or the causes of action. So anyhow, let's do this. Introduction. This case arises from defendants' knowing publication of 2 false and defamatory exposés into the private life of the well-known founder of Barstool Sports, plaintiff David Portnoy, Mr. Portnoy. On February 3rd, 2022, a representative for defendant Insider, Inc., or Insider, gave an interview to Variety boasting, "If we get sued, we will defend the case vigorously. News organizations regularly get sued. It's the cost of doing business." I mean, that's probably true. I would imagine that most journalistic outlets would probably expect to be sued from time to time, because otherwise then they probably see them as not doing their proper job if they're not ruffling feathers enough to be claiming anyhow, you know the thing. Perhaps it is the cost of doing business for Insider, a publication that generates its revenue through clickbait journalism and the publication of false and defamatory hit pieces concerning the country's most well-known figures. To Insider, the truth has always played second fiddle to the dollar. Okay, that's fair, but it's a little bit, it's a little bit blustery, I guess you could say. But hey, maybe he's right. Defendants published as fact that Mr. Portnoy had violently AR'd and intimately assaulted. I'm gonna modify these words a little bit for anybody that is listening on the podcast. I'm modifying the words that I'm reading off of the page here from the complaint, just because I don't want it to get too demonetized. Okay, so anyway, so they published as fact that Mr. Portnoy had violently AR'd and sexually assaulted, there I said it, 3 unnamed females, an outright fabrication. Defendants perpetrated their hit pieces as part of a preconceived plan to sensationalize a story in order to drive reader traffic to an internet location where they could then be solicited to subscribe to defendants' tabloid-like publication. Further demonstrating defendants' malicious intent, each of Insider's stories was published on a date coinciding with Penn National Gaming's quarterly earnings announcements. In parentheses, Penn National Gaming owns a 36% stake in Barstool Sports. Defendants' actions were outside any conceivable notion of actual journalism. Mr. Portnoy seeks to hold defendants accountable for their willful and unlawful defamation and privacy rights violations. So, this part about the Penn National Gaming's quarterly earnings announcements, that's interesting. It's interesting because it seems like they're going to be suggesting that that they're not just trying to hurt his reputation, but also hurt Portnoy's financial pocketbook, particularly because of the fact that he's the founder of Barstool Sports. And if anybody is somehow unaware, Barstool Sports is an online, I mean, I guess you could say website, but they have other YouTube channels and that kind of stuff. But I think mostly centered on a website. Started particularly about sports, but it's like sports and pop culture. Portnoy himself describes it, I think, as like a sports / smut kind of publication. So, but there are 2 big investors. Penn National Gaming is one of them. I can't remember the name of the other. Maybe someone in the chat will know. Someone in the chat will probably know. So yeah, Chris Azaris is sports and entertainment. That's true. Yeah. So, okay. Defendants calculated that canceling Mr. Portnoy would be a lucrative business for Insider. Insider and its staff were willing to cash in on their stories while knowingly disregarding the truth. In publishing the false and defamatory stories aimed at destroying Mr. Portnoy's reputation, Insider sought to cause the downfall of one of Massachusetts' most well-known entrepreneurs and media personalities. Indeed, Mr. Portnoy's life has been nothing short of remarkable. In 2003, in Milton, Massachusetts, Mr. Portnoy created a small sports newspaper named Barstool Sports. In the publication's early days, Mr. Portnoy self-authored and printed the newspaper's first issues and distributed them to commuters on the Boston subway system. Since its humble beginnings 18 years ago, and under Mr. Portnoy's leadership, Barstool Sports has become one of the most widely known sports media and pop culture enterprises in the world. Because of Mr. Portnoy's celebrity and notoriety, Insider viewed him as the perfect target for its false, albeit scandalous, hit pieces into a celebrity's private life. Insider's defamatory scheme was well planned and nearly a year in the making, and the defamatory stories would serve as the launch for Insider's promotion on discounted premium subscriptions to its online publication, Business Insider. So, 2 points about that paragraph. Number one, he's referring to himself as a well-known person. So this means for defamation cases, I'm going to talk about all of the different elements of defamation, but in this particular case, we're going to talk about actual malice because that is the standard that is required for people that are well-known, that are household names, et cetera, et cetera. So famous people that put themselves out there in the limelight and then become very well-known. That's different than the standard that would be for any regular person that's filing a lawsuit for defamation. And then number two is it seems like they're suggesting here so far that that Insider had a particular financial reason to do all of this, and that is to build up their own business. So for business purposes, in order to profit from him, that is potentially going to go towards seeking punitive damages. We saw this in, excuse me. We saw this in the Cardi B lawsuit when Cardi B sued Tasha K for making all kinds of defamatory statements against her, and she 100% won because Tasha K basically admitted on the stand, yes, I lied about everything. I pretty much knew that what I was saying was false, and I said it anyway. I didn't really care. And oh, by the way, this is my business. This is what I do. This is sorry that you are harmed by this, but that's what I do for my business. I make money this way. And that set her up for not only being liable for defamation, but also for punitive damages on top of that, because that's like you're profiting on top of it. You're not just saying it and oh, oops. You're saying it and then you're making money from it. That's something that could potentially open you up to more damages on top of normal compensatory damages. So, turning back. Without a modicum of journalistic integrity, with Insider's chief executive officer Henry Blodgett at the helm, Insider, its reporters Julia Black and Milk Lycea, and their editor Nicholas Carlson, collectively defendants, engaged in a calculated smear campaign against Mr. Portnoy by publishing and thereafter refusing to retract and or correct 2 false and defamatory stories on its website, at least suggesting, if not blatantly stating, that Mr. Portnoy sexually assaulted 3 women. Insider's allegations are patently false and, critically, are belied by the evidence actually in Insider's possession. Ooh, okay. That's, if that is true, that they had certain exculpatory evidence that would suggest that what they were saying is not true, that is something that is particularly interesting in this case and would be very, very helpful to his claims. So, paragraph 5 says, over the last 10 months, defendants have engaged in targeted smear campaign designed to destroy Mr. Portnoy's reputation and boost Insider's viewership and subscription revenue, which includes the following. Paragraph 1, or subparagraph 1, defendants knowingly and repeatedly published 2 false standalone headlines to lure readers and potential subscribers to their website, stating, for example, quote, I was literally screaming in pain. Young women say they met Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy for sex, and it turned violent and humiliating. There should be, unquote. Okay, Insider thereby suggested actual criminal wrongdoing on Mr. Portnoy's part without further explanation, a tactic which is known as clickbait journalism, giving rise to a claim here for clickbait defamation. So I think that the suggestion here is that because there was a paywall that interfered with the general public reading the actual article. The statement in the title alone is defamatory, according to Portnoy. I think that there's a possibility there. There's a suggestion that if it turned violent and humiliating, I mean, it doesn't necessarily say explicitly that it turned criminal, but it seems like that's suggesting that there's a criminal a criminal element in there, which is potentially defamatory. But this is what this is going for, is to say that it's not just people who subscribe to Insider that saw this article, that saw the defamatory content in this article. What this would be suggesting is that anyone who saw that headline, regardless of whether they pay the money to Insider to get past the paywall, regardless of that, all of the people that saw the title alone would have had that reputational mindset change of Dave Portnoy, which I think is potentially true, because I think I remember seeing the initial headline and thinking like, oh wow, that's pretty nuts. So, okay. So, subparagraph 2, it says, defendants published directly and via innuendo that Mr. Portnoy had committed the crimes of R, intimate assault, and surreptitious recording while in possession of text and social media messages showing just the opposite. Okay. Defendants pursued a preconceived and biased agenda aimed at damaging Mr. Portnoy to drive online traffic and subscription revenue to Insider. 4, defendants improperly and knowingly relied upon biased sources who demanded anonymity, all while being in possession of documentary evidence that each source's story was incredible and unreliable. And 5, defendants published highly personal and private information in violation of the Massachusetts privacy statute and Mr. Portnoy's common law right of privacy, while affording confidentiality and anonymity to defendants' alleged sources. All right. Mr. Portnoy has never intimately assaulted anyone, and defendants are well aware of this fact. Nevertheless, Insider is attempting to cash in on the climate of fear and cancel culture permeating the media, whereby it has become open season for anyone to make any claim, no matter how vile and unsupported, about anyone seemingly without consequence. There are, however, consequences for unlawfully defaming someone. Well, that is true. If you can prove defamation. Mr. Portnoy will not stand idly by while Insider and its Twitter army of executives, editors, and reporters attempt to drive clicks, viewership, and subscription revenue for themselves by recklessly spreading malicious and defamatory lies that Mr. Portnoy engaged in egregious criminal conduct by sexually assaulting 3 women and or recording them without their knowledge or consent. Even after being confronted with the exculpatory evidence that contradicts the maelstrom of false allegations in its stories, rather than admitting to its misconduct and irresponsible journalism, Insider refused to retract, correct, or even update its stories about Mr. Portnoy and is instead maliciously standing by its false and defamatory reporting. Now, months after its initial publication, Insider continues to use Portnoy as bait to attract consumers to its subscription service. Insider's conduct here is shameful, but given defendants' track records, it is not surprising. Mr. Portnoy brings this action to clear his name, to set the record straight, and to recover the substantial damages that defendants caused him as a result of the irresponsible and defamatory stories they published about him. Whew. Okay, so that is the introduction here. And we're going to get into some of the details of each article as it comes up in the complaint.